I went and did a quick grocery shop so that I can actually not leave the house tomorrow.
Oh, lovely.
Hey, we're live. We are live.
We're live.
Oh, that might show a bit light behind. Don't get distracted by that.
Oh,
you can, we listen to Robyn.
yes.
And you look at that. What I'm going to do is bring Robyn up here.
Yep.
Hello, anybody who's watching. Well, we iron out the
kinks in the system.
Iron out the kinks.
Okay.
I'll see if someone is watching.
Who's watching?
3 people are watching, so they're just watching us figure all this out.
The idiots.
We're watching half my head on the screen.
Okay, Honeybee is with us. Mel, could you please let us know if this all looks relatively okay? Can you hear us okay?
And can you hear me?
G'day, guys.
G'day.
Can you hear Robyn?
Can you make sure you can all hear me as well?
Okay, there might be a little bit of a delay from them. We are watching. Hi, Vanessa. Cool. All right, so what we're going to do is just jump straight into it. So we're not taking up too much of Robyn's valuable time. Thank you so much for jumping on this interview with us today. This is like our first ROCKPILE channel Q&A. Robyn is, so we'll jump back into the comments intermittently. I'll tap you and you can tell me the comments. So Robyn is the community garden coordinator up in Port Hedland, and she is a self-confessed crazy garden lady who is going to talk to us today about soil health and compost. If you've watched any of our recent videos, we have one of our goals for 2023 is to make over our veggie garden patch. And when we kind of put that out, having a conversation with our community, we're not the only one. So we thought it'd be a really good opportunity to get some good, solid, basic information around soil health and how that impacts plant health. So yeah, thanks, Robyn. Thanks for joining us today. Is there anything else you want to add about yourself, or was that kind of did I cover everything?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I get paid to shovel shit for a living and grow food.
Fair call.
Awesome. Okay, so my first question for you is, why should people growing vegetables care about how good their soil is? Shouldn't they focus on growing good plants?
No, not at all. Basically, my philosophy is I don't grow plants, I grow soil, and I let the soil grow the plants. We get the nutrition that we eat we get the nutrition for our bodies from the food we eat, and the plants are the same. They're drawing their nutrition from the only place they can, which is the soil. So if we're growing in dirt, poor quality soil, then our fruit and vegetables aren't going to have that nutritional value either. So by working on your soil, if you grow the most healthiest, nutritious soil you can, let them do the work for you. That'll then grow the plants. It'll help with your pest control. It helps with water retention. It helps with a lot of things. So healthy soil isn't just, sort of for one reason. It's for a whole range of things.
So you say healthy, nutritious soil. What exactly is that? What are you talking about when you say healthy, nutritious soil?
So when you look at any of your food and it'll say, packed with vitamins and minerals and all that sort of stuff, well, that's what you want your soil to be as well. So if you've ever seen a soil test, which most people haven't because it's not something that most backyard gardeners will do, it comes up with a whole range of things that are in your soil or that are lacking from your soil. So all your micronutrients and your macros. So we all know about your main, your phosphorus, your potassium, and your nitrogen. But there's a whole range of.
Is that the NPK?
Yeah, that's your NPK.
Okay.
So that's your top 3. If you were going to do nothing else, your NPK, that's all right. But your body can't just live on 3 nutrients. So adding in your calcium and then, the more nutrients you can put in. So, your plants don't necessarily need those nutrients, but if they're there, they'll uptake them and then you're getting them. So if you've got extra I don't know, say calcium in there in your soil, it can uptake. There's all your little ones. The more you get in it, the better. Like with yourself, you know, when you're eating a really healthy diet and you're eating really good food and you're getting a more balanced diet, you feel really good. Or if you're having that multivitamin, you know, you get that zing of vitamin B, it makes you feel better. Well, the soil's the same.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
That makes total sense.
So if you're, say, for example, like us,
Like you and me.
yeah,
Yep.
like us,
Mhm.
and we're starting from scratch, zilch, nada. We've got like an empty patch and say an empty raised garden bed. How do you get it to the point where you're growing like vegetables, not just the fastest way possible, but, you know, setting yourself up to grow like healthy, have a healthy, productive veggie patch? Like what do we do first?
Yep. Okay. So the best thing you can do is, in my opinion, also the fastest thing you can do. So it does actually work pretty quickly. If you're starting off, and I wish I'd sort of had thought about it, I could have brought a soil sample with me from work to show you, is to do what we call the lasagna method, the lasagna layer method of garden bed building. Okay. At work, obviously, you know, I'm getting paid, so I build a lot of compost. At home, I'm a really lazy gardener. And so the least amount of work I can do for the biggest amount of impact just happens to be one of the best ways to do exactly what you're asking for. And so what we did was, it was it wasn't now, it was in 2021. Baden, my eldest, he won the Junior Australian of the Year for Port Hedland. And that came with a fairly sizable donation to go towards his volunteering. So what he did was he purchased 2 garden beds, like big raised garden beds, the 1.8 long by about 45 high. And so he needed to fill those. And that's a lot of soil. And we can't buy soil in Port Hedland. We have to make it all ourselves. Sorry, mate. You've still got me here?
Yep. You're still with us.
No, Messenger Kids has just zinged in. And so what we needed to do is we have to make a lot of soil without the ability to purchase a lot of soil.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay.
And so what you do, if you do your lasagna method, it's composting for you while you're growing your food already. So what we do is we put the bed in. If you're growing onto grass, I would put a really thick layer of wet cardboard or newspaper down just to help suppress some of those weeds and grass from coming through, especially if you've got something like couch grass. And then we just sort of put a nice big thick layer of hay, or if you've got any tree branches and prunings are really good. They take many, many years to break down. But what happens is they're going to compost. They're going to release a very, very slow release of nutrients. And because they're decaying wood, attracts bacteria and stuff like that. Your good bacteria and your fungi and all that sort of stuff is going to feast on it. So you've got food for them while they're working for you. Okay. So you want to put some tree branches, prunings, whatever on the bottom. And then you just want to layer it between what we call a nitrogen layer and a carbon layer, or your green and your brown. So your green is your nitrogen, your brown is your carbon. So any manure you've got, I know manure is brown in colour, but it's actually a nitrogen, so it's considered a green. What you want to do, so you've got those branches on the bottom, that's your brown, so your tree, that's your carbon. Then you want to do a layer of manure, then a layer of hay, shredded paper, cardboard, dead leaves, dead dry grass clippings, anything like that. Then again, you want another layer of your nitrogen or your green, so manure. In that, you can put a heap of coffee grounds. I know you've been posting a little bit about your coffee grounds this week. Coffee grounds are a fantastic nitrogen. They're also good for something else that I've lost off the top of my head, but coffee grounds are great in compost. And then, if you can go to your local supermarket and get their old lettuce leaves and stuff like that, that can go in there. Everything in the garden is about diversity. Now, if you can only get your hands on straw and horse manure, great, it'll work. But if you can get horse manure, cow manure. I know in the wheat belt you get a lot of sheep manure, chicken manure, all that sort of stuff. Add that in as well. With your chicken manure, if you've only got fresh stuff, use it as your bottom layer. People will say, oh, you can't use chicken manure unless it's aged. Chuck it down the bottom. By the time your plants get down that far, your roots, it will have aged. The ammonia is gone. If you live up in a really hot area like what I do, just sort of leave it out for a couple of days and the ammonia is gone very quickly. It dries out really fast.
Okay.
But yeah, so then just keep going all the way until pretty much the top. Then on your top layer, that's when you want to put some compost on there, stuff that's ready to plant into right now. So if you haven't already got your compost ready from home, it's not, it's not the end of the world if you have to go and buy some composted cow manure, some composted veggie mix, because you only really want an inch or so, maybe 2 inches tops on that top layer, just enough to put your seed into. Yeah, because it's going to drop roots. And as your plant's growing and it's dropping all its roots, it's helping aerate things. So you're not having to turn your compost because the roots are going down there. What you can do, one of the best things you can do is get some worm castings in it as well. You don't need to put the worms themselves in there. You just put the worm castings in because the worm castings are full of eggs.
Okay, gotcha.
And they will hatch. And so with Baden's garden bed that he did, I don't even remember him putting worm castings in there, but he must have done, because there is that many worms in this garden bed and the castings just actually wash out the bottom of the garden bed.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's incredible to see, because he's got his garden bed on a layer of brick paving. It's not straight onto soil. So instead of it sort of just leaching into the soil, the castings are just sort of washing out of the bottom of the bed, and we then sort of scoop them up and use them in other places. But yeah, worm castings, and you don't need a lot of worm castings. Worm castings are the number one. They're like the gold standard of everything. If you can get yourself
Sorry, is that like purchase worm castings from the shop? Because I've seen worm castings for sale from the shop.
No, somebody will give them to you.
Yeah, okay. All right.
All you do is you put a call out on your local garden group and just say, hey, I'm after a small amount of worm castings. Now, you can use that to start a worm farm. It'll be a slow start, or just put a little bit in each bed and it will kick it off. Like I only put in, maybe each bed gets maybe a shovel full once a year. Sometimes twice a year if I'm being really generous, but generally only once a year. And I'll mix that in with my compost. So because we've got our compost at the garden already, in that top layer, I've got in there, I sort of do a bit of a mix and mash and all sorts of different things in there. So it's the compost. I put in, last year I tried a new product that I was able to get from the hardware store called Seamungus. It's one of the Nutrog ranges, I think it is.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just instead of your pelletized chicken manure, it's a pelletized like ocean product. So your seaweed, and I think it's fish waste and stuff like that. I also used some blood and bone and some worm castings. And for us up here, because we've got the high pH, we use gypsum like it's going out of fashion. There's no such thing as too much gypsum up here because it is good to break up. We don't have clay soil, we have sand, but it's called pindan, and it's like rock. So and if you get it wet, it just sets like cement. It's terrible. So we use the gypsum not only to help lower the pH, but also to help just break a little bit of that pindan up.
Right. Oh, that lasagna method sounds awesome, because when you're looking at, like, if you don't have your own soil and you're looking at buying like a veggie mix and you're going to have to fill a whole bed of vegetable soil,
it can get expensive.
Your mind gets cost. But
affordable.
I'm just going to jump into the comments here and just see what people are saying, and you can have a chance to have a drink.
Honeybee just said,
I'll start at the top. Okay. Oh, Sunday slippers. Okay, so Jamie mentions that he just found out in his horticultural course at TAFE and land management that you can use ultraviolet light for growing plants inside. So, and someone else mentioned you can, but it's like not like enough. Jamie also mentioned using coffee grinds, and you can usually get them for free, which is true. Like if you approach a cafe or what have you. Jamie also said paper bark of the paper trees are pretty good. Also, I'm wondering if, Jamie, did you mean like as a way of like layering in the lasagna method?
I could see how the paper bark could be like a good water moisture holder, possibly.
And Mel and Honeybee says, oh my God, Seamungus is amazing. So yeah, and Sarah said yes, prices of soil are pretty extreme. So yeah, so that's the lasagna method is pretty much exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah.
You're talking about, like you mentioned, that it's all going to be composting down as you're growing, and the composting, it's got like the browns and greens. Can you tell us a little bit more about like that compost? Like what are the basics of the browns and the greens? Is there any good way to kind of remember which is which and like the ratios and that sort of thing?
So when I first started really looking into compost, I sort of felt fairly confident with what I was doing and jumped onto YouTube, and it made me feel like I knew nothing. Most composting videos, and I think in the last couple of years they've gotten a lot better, but I know certainly, sort of that 5 years ago when I was first starting to get into it, every single composting video I was watching on YouTube talked about ratios, and you pretty much had to be a mathematician to understand what they were talking about. And I was like, I make beautiful compost and I don't understand this. This does not make sense to me. And basically to sort of dumb it right down, or to make it so that, anybody but a mathematician can understand it, it's really, really simple. You need two types of ingredients. You need your green, which is your nitrogen. You need your brown, which is your carbon. You mix those. You just do your layers basically. And I like to do roughly double the carbon than nitrogen.
Okay.
But your compost will tell you very quickly if you've got your ratio wrong. If your compost is smelly and really stinks and sort of smells like a rotting smell, you've either put a couple of wrong ingredients in there or you've got too much green stuff.
Okay.
If your compost is dry, even if you get a ton of rain and it's still dry a few inches down, it means you've got too much carbon in it.
Okay.
And all you do is you adjust it accordingly. So if it's too wet, you add more carbon. If it's too dry, you add more nitrogen. And that's as simple as it is.
Okay. I have a question. All right. So on one hand, you've got like composting that creates like a hot compost, and you've got this idea of like filling garden beds with this organic material that will compost down. We're not aiming for like a hot compost in our garden beds, are we? Like, how do we, like, what happens there? Is that something we're trying to avoid, or is that not really that much of an issue because we're not?
Well, and I mean, obviously I'm up in one of the hottest places in the country and it's made no difference to me.
Okay.
When I do my, because I mean, to make a hot compost, you need at least a cubic meter of space in that, like in like sort of a pretty big mound.
Yep.
I have, in the few years that we've been doing this method, have never ever lost any plants and thought, oh gee, maybe this soil's too hot.
Okay.
So it's not actually something I've ever thought about, to be honest, because I know sort of our hot compost here, you burn your hand if you stick it in too deep in the summer.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe because we're sort of doing these generally, because we don't grow a lot in summer, we grow mostly in winter. If we were to do any of those new beds that we're doing the lasagna method with to begin with, the first time we build it, it's sort of happening at the start of the growing season. And I guess by the time we get to the heat of the next year, it's already, that bed's already fully composted. So I guess if that soil's getting nice and warm, it's probably even maybe helping. So that could be something you could experiment with over winter, would be to do like a really nice big deep lasagna laid bed, and maybe try and grow something that needs the warmer soil, because if that's going to heat up, that might be actually beneficial.
Yeah,
I don't know. We don't get cold soil here, so I wouldn't know.
You mentioned putting like tree branches and stuff like down the bottom. Is that like hugelculture, or is it?
Yeah,
like,
sort of.
Just not like officially.
Yeah, it's sort of not officially. I've sort of looked into hugelculture. And I think to do a proper hugelculture, there's a lot of different things you're supposed to do. Okay. I guess, you could probably, maybe it's a poor man's hugelculture. I don't know. I just like what it does to the soil when we put the branches in the bottom. And if you've got a nice deep bed, putting in all your tree rubbish or your prunings and stuff is obviously, it's a trip to the tip you don't have to do. And it's a ton of soil you don't have to buy or make. And then what happens, so with your lasagna method though, like your bed's going to be pretty full. By the end of the season, it's going to have broken all the way down because it's fully composted. So what you then do is, and I did see somebody with a question before that asked this about ripping plants out versus cutting them off.
Yep.
I prefer to cut them off. Usually I've got volunteers in and, they just rip them out. But yeah, the preference is to just cut them off, because it then leaves the roots in the soil, and it keeps the food there for the microbes to keep eating. Okay. And then then they'll eat all those root systems, and then that aerates your soil for you. Do not dig your soil. So digging your soil is one of the worst things you can do. Digging causes compaction. I know it sounds sort of counterproductive, but digging the soil compacts your soil. So don't dig it. Once you've done your lasagna method, know that you're never digging that again, unless it's to bury a chicken, bury some fish frames. Don't dig it again.
What happens is ask about burying meat. I think somebody did ask about.
Yeah.
Like what can you do? Like, can you bury stuff that is like meat-based organic material?
I bury my chickens and fish, like anybody up here in Headland, because we're all come from fishing backgrounds, or we've all got neighbours that fish.
Yep.
Some blokes will actually fish all year round and keep their frames in the freezer all year, and then before they plant again, they'll dig a big trench, bury the fish frames, and that gets all your minerals and stuff from the ocean, from all your calcium from your bones. I put in all the guts, I put in all of the leftover fish bits, all the scales and skin and the heads. And up here, those bones are gone very quickly. Like our heat here just disintegrates them.
Well, I know Joel Salatin, when he processes his pigs on a large scale and large composting, he composts all the pigs, the stuff.
Yeah. Right.
So
if you look at Joel Salatin on YouTube, he composts his cows. So if he has a cow that dies, because his compost pile is bigger than most people's houses.
Yeah.
And he just buries a cow in there. And you wouldn't want to compost meat in a standard backyard system. You would not want to compost meat. It brings your rodents, it brings your predators. And that's one of the things that will make it really smell. Don't put meat or fish in a compost. Bury it under the ground. And so long as, and I mean, it depends on what sort of animals you've got. I mean, your dog, you wouldn't want to put it in the orchard, because your wonderful dogs will dig it up.
Yes. Really good noses.
But we don't have dogs, so all of the fish frames and chickens get buried in the garden here. But so what you want to do when your crop is finished, cut them off, leave your mulch there as well. So even just chop and drop. So chop your tomato plants down and just leave them there. They'll break down over your non-gardening months. Then when it comes for next season, you've already been making your compost by this stage. You just put your new layer of compost straight on top.
Okay, and just build it back up again, and that will
And it just goes.
Okay.
Yep. Because when, if you've ever dug your soil or even turned your compost or anything, and you see this white powdery stuff all the way through it, people get really panicked and think there's something wrong. That white stuff is called mycorrhizal fungi, and it is basically like the internet of the soil. So what it does is it attaches itself to plant roots and it talks between the plants. So, your corn, we all know how heavy feeders corn are. They love their nitrogen. So they're looking for nitrogen wherever they can get it from. Your beans or any of your legumes are a nitrogen fixer. So they put nitrogen into the soil. So if you put your beans and your corn together,
yep,
those mycorrhizal fungi, if you haven't dug your soil, will attach to those plants and they'll talk. And the corn will be like, anybody got nitrogen? The bean's like, yeah, take it from me. And
love it.
It's the internet, it's like Facebook.
But if that's sort of like the Three Sisters method with the...
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Native American Indians, without knowing the information of, I guess, why, knew that it worked. And then to add the pumpkins in on top of that as well helped cool the soil down. But another really good thing that any of your running plants are for, and this is what we do up here in summer because we can't grow a lot, we will put in bulk watermelons, sweet potatoes, pumpkins. It covers your soil and it keeps your soil cooler. But what happens is as those leaves die off and go into the ground, they compost. So it's adding more organic matter over summer while we're not using it. And keeping the plants in the soil keeps the soil alive. If you've ever seen a patch where, so when you pulled your garlic out, did you put anything in it again or have you left it?
No, that's it.
Go and have a look at it and see the difference of what it looked like when you harvested the garlic versus what it looks like now. And you'll just see that unless it's full of weeds, which is actually not a bad thing, it'll be dead. It'll be dry. It'll be hydrophobic because it's had no reason to stay alive.
Yeah.
Whereas if you had chased your garlic with something else, you sort of find out what garlic feeds a lot on, and you can always benefit from putting a legume in. So for you, because you do get that hot summer, where you put your garlic, you could maybe chase that with peanuts. Because peanuts like the hot.
Yep.
And they're a nitrogen fixer.
Yeah, exactly.
So then you could put that in, and then after you've done your peanuts, you could probably put a corn in there because it's put the nitrogen back in.
Chasing the nitrogen. Yeah.
Cool.
So keep it alive.
All right, we're just going, you drink water, and we're just going to jump into where the comments are coming in thick and fast now. We're just going to jump into here. Which one?
Do this one from Vanessa here.
Okay, Vanessa says, just wondering, I have fruit trees in pots I want to put into the ground. Do I do lasagna layers below the tree before I plant it? That'd be a really deep hole. So
look, I'm not an expert on fruit trees, but you want a nice big hole anyway. So you want to dig as big a hole as you can sort of manage. Yep. And then, put in lots and lots of organic matter in it. And, you could do, and whenever I've done fruit trees, we've done the lasagna as well. Sort of a couple of layers on the bottom underneath, and then sort of just backfilled with compost, or, sort of backfilled most of it with compost, and then sort of some of the remaining soil around the top, depending on what kind of soil you've got. Cool. But the bigger the hole you can plant, is the better your tree will be in the long run. And absolutely put as much compost and your hay especially. For us here, we can get all the hay we need for free. All the horse stables here, we're really lucky. We get the hay and the horse manure free of charge, or they have to take it to the tip. So they call us the poo fairies. So for me to say, no, just go and get bulk hay is a really easy thing to say because I can get it for free. If you don't have access to it for free, I'd like to think that most homesteaders probably could, because I don't know that. But I would be looking at horse people, especially because a lot of the animals and cows are the same. Yeah. The hay has to be in 100% good condition or it can kill them. So we get a lot of free hay. Like my cousin brought me down 2 massive round bales from Broome a couple of months ago because the middle had gotten slightly wet and had gone mouldy, and that can kill a horse. But for chickens and gardens, like chickens will eat anything. Not much will kill a chicken. They scratch in it, they poop it in it, they compost it for you.
Yeah.
And then on the veggie bed, the veggie garden doesn't care about a bit of mold. So yeah, getting off hay is good.
Yeah.
What did you see jump out
just,
there? Thank you for that.
Going
Robyn,
back to burying the meat products in a large compost pile. Honeybee has said this one here. She goes, she filled the bottom of her raised beds with the bodies of some dead chickens and leftover meat from their recent kill. And they threw a whole gut bag in there and then covered it with horse and cow poop. So that was
okay.
Yep, that was a good one.
All right.
I can see how putting meat products in a very small compost area is not good, but when you're talking a bit bigger scale,
that's right. Yeah,
you kind of got that volume there.
And someone else in the comments just mentioned for like if you're interested in no dig methods, you can also look up Charles Dowding.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he's on YouTube and I think he has like a number of books and stuff.
He's got a lot of videos.
My Aussie Gardening Kitchen says they bury their chickens in the orchard. Hopefully they're dead, not alive.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Are you good to answer a few more questions that I've got sort of saved up here from our posts in the group, and we'll let the guys chat away. Okay, so we've actually already covered like some of them.
I stopped answering them, so we have stuff to discuss.
Okay, so 5 Acre Farm was the one that asked whether you pull it or cut it. And let's see, you've already answered that one in the group. Okay, so Sarah has asked, she said she's unsure if you have termites out where you are, but is using Jarrah for garden beds or compost structures any good? Would it impact the soil negatively?
So I did start to respond to this one, and I was like, no, don't just wait, just leave it. We cannot use wood products up here at all. That's how bad our termites are. We've got them even, like we basically learned to live with them on the property. We had some big rain a couple of days ago, and in our cracker dust driveway, there was queen termites all through it. So basically we just have to make sure the house is protected. That's how bad the termites are here. But yeah, I know when I cut down trees and stuff, if we leave them for a couple of months in the backyard to dry out, they're straight into it. So with your Jarrah, look, I'm not an expert. I would honestly do your own research, but I think any organic material is fine. If that Jarrah has been treated, then absolutely I would not do that. But if it's, and I think they use Jarrah sometimes because they don't need to treat it. I think I read that somewhere. When somebody wrote about railway sleepers the other day, I did actually do a bit of Googling. I was going to answer the question, but I just couldn't find online an answer that made me happy. For me, I personally wouldn't use the old-fashioned railway sleepers. I think they use Jarrah now because they don't need to be treated, I think is what I found. There's a chemical that they use in the railway sleepers, or used to use in them, that some websites on the internet say is safe to use in gardens, but says you can use it in your gardens, but don't touch it for too long with your hands.
So growing food in it and eating that food is okay.
To me personally, wanting to be an organic grower, I wouldn't use that. I used to use car tires until I knew better. The jury's really out on car tires for edibles. So because nobody could give me a definitive answer, I backed away from them, and I don't use them and don't recommend them, just because nobody can tell me for sure whether. Some people say that it takes X amount of years for the chemicals to leach out of tyres. Other people say it doesn't, they don't start leaching out until after X amount of years. So to me, if you're not 100% sure, you know, if you're wanting to use Roundup in your garden, then go for it. Use all the treated pine you want. But to me, if you're going to do an organic garden, I would want organic materials.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so talking about like organic material, treated versus untreated, Honeybee asked where, like, is there an issue around like peanuts being treated for stuff? Is that, what was her exact question? Where would you get your untreated peanuts from?
The supermarket.
Okay, so what do you, honey, Mel, what do you mean by treated? Do you mean that, like, because they've got a few generations of...
Go into the health food section in the supermarket and get organic raw peanuts.
Okay.
Because you need
Eric says it's not about the first generation, it's the third plus and on that matters. Okay.
All
right, so just raw peanuts, and sorry, you just go get raw peanuts from the supermarket and then what, stick them in the ground?
The whole one, so you want them in like the ones in the shells.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I've purchased, and I think it was actually from Wendy's, to be honest, peanuts, and when I've bought them, they are just whole peanuts. So you'd want
peanuts from Wendy's, actually.
You'd want to shell them, and then just stick the peanut in the ground.
Huh.
Wow.
But yeah, obviously you don't want them roasted or salted or anything like that. You want them raw and organic.
In a maple glaze.
they won't produce ready roasted salted peanuts for you.
Another question from Sarah, I guess looping back around to the worms. She said, my last question is regarding worm farms. She got gifted one, but they all died due to the heat. She would love to know how to set it up properly so she can avoid this in the future.
Yeah, look, last summer mine survived, but I've already checked, and this summer hasn't even been as hot and they've died. But the castings survive and they just hatch. So long as don't throw your castings out, like you know, use your castings that you need on your garden, but keep some of those castings in, and they will hatch again. But generally so when you go to your hardware store and go into your worm section, you will have a starter kit and a top up. So, you know, your starter kit, you want your 1,000 worms, but for a top up, you know, you can get the 500. So I think it's a fairly normal thing for them to die in summer. I've had people say they bring them inside if they've got one of those little systems. They've brought them inside for the summer. You know, mine's in a big giant fridge.
We'll tell Sarah not to feel too bad about that then.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly normal. And the eggs hatch. The eggs seem to survive the heat.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. Have you noticed any more questions in there?
Oh, that's my job, isn't it?
Oh, well.
If Eric could just sort of clarify on his comment about the second and third generation on the peanuts.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That'd be good. Thanks, Eric.
And there's a few recommendations for different like YouTube channels and stuff in the comments. I don't think there's any other specific questions by what I can see.
Oh,
it's not my laptop isn't a touchscreen. So, all right. So if you were to give like someone starting from scratch, wanting to like build a healthy, productive, long-term garden bed to grow the vegetables in, and like you said, like once you get it going, you're not digging that back up again, you're just adding to it. What would be kind of the top things, like the top takeaways that you would think they would need to walk away from this discussion with?
One thing I sort of always teach, and it's slightly off topic, but still on topic, when I teach our Start Your Patch from Scratch workshop every year, is start small. Do not look at what people like me are doing and go, that's where I need to be in 8 weeks' time, because you will fail. I've been doing this for a lot of years. When I started at the community garden, it was already a couple of years in. I walked into the bones already being there. I was raised growing, veggie gardens. Don't sort of look at what people are doing on YouTube and say, right, anything less than 300 square meters of garden bed in 8 weeks' time is a failure. Start small and have your success, because when you fail that first time, you quit because you think, right, it's not for me, I can't do it. Yeah. I understand a lot of people on homesteads have got a lot of space and that want to, put in a half-acre veggie garden is there, because, if you're watching this, then you're on the same page as you and I, that, that we're wanting to be that self-sufficient, and we want to rely less on the shops, but you can't do it overnight. I mean, look at how long it's taking your fruit trees. If you had planted those fruit trees, even especially those mature ones that you planted, if you'd gone, oh, they didn't produce me 30 kilos of fruit the first year, oh, I failed. So you've got to know that it's a journey and that it takes a lot of time. So start with your soil, especially if you're, I'm not sure if you're in your off season at the moment. Where you are in your off season, get your compost pumping. Just, blitz through the heat, blitz through the cold, whatever it is your season is that's your off season, work on your compost. Compost. And if you think you've got enough compost, double it. And then maybe you might be halfway there.
Definitely,
And if you are in doubt, start with tomatoes. Tomatoes are really, sort of fairly safe thing to grow. Start with some tomatoes and go from there. And when you have your success on your tomatoes, add in some cucumbers and just get bigger a little bit each year. Keep your soil alive. And one other sort of thing that I'm really, really passionate on with your soil health is, again, it's diversity above the ground as well as below the ground. If you plant an entire garden bed of just tomatoes, you're going to take out one sort of set of nutrients, and you're not going to necessarily have enough of that nutrient to feed those tomatoes. So So what you want to do is, the way I was taught was, if you can plant a minimum of 4 different types of plants in any one garden bed, that's going to really sort of ramp up your biodiversity in soil. If you've ever watched anything by Gabe Brown, you'll know that his cover crops, he's got like 19 different types of crops in his cover crop alone, not the crop he's actually growing. So you want diversity. If you're not sure, add something extra, add something different. So for example, for tomatoes, I like to do tomatoes, basil, marigolds,
so mixing your herbs and flowers and not just vegetables.
Yeah.
I think that kind of tackles because you read a lot of things like, hey, you have to like rotate your garden, and people have like rotate your beds in different things, and this goes up to that, and it seems like this big complicated system, and I feel like people make it more complicated than it is. And I do want to say, Honeybee, I did see your comment about, don't forget about the biochar. I will. She's written it down. I've written it down. Before we go, I might get your thoughts on that, Robyn. Yeah. But yeah,
I'm just new to that one too.
Okay.
But, so my philosophy on crop rotation is that it might be a little bit of bullshit. because in nature, who was rotating the wild? Who rotates the wild crops? Who makes sure in nature, before we were growing all this stuff, who was making sure the tomatoes didn't self-seed in the same spot the following year? Those tomatoes still grew. And you'll find that your self-seeded tomato that pops up in the same spot from last year is the best tomato you get.
Totally.
So would I advocate for planting tomatoes in the same spot every year for the rest of your life? No. But if you're mixing it up, and if you've got like 4 or 5 different types of plants in that one garden bed, you're already sort of got your diversity in there. And if you're growing all year round, even just sort of putting, you've got your crops and then you rip them out for summer and you put another layer of compost on top, and then you put your watermelon in, you've already kind of rotated it a bit, and you've put fresh soil on top. So whilst I do sort of do crop rotation, I will certainly, if I know that something is growing amazingly in a spot, why would I move it?
Awesome.
Just keep your diversity up.
Cool. Well, I might just, I know you said you've only just started doing sort of biochar stuff. Have you got any thoughts around that? Have as someone starting on that, and we might wrap up after.
And we'll just finish with some kind words. There's some nice posts coming in.
I will.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, obviously we've only just started it this winter gone, because we actually had a bit of a winter, so we were able to have a fire pit. Normally we have 3 seconds of winter up here, and you don't realize that it's finished before you even get to light a fire. And it's outside. We don't ever need it. We have no heating in our housing because we just don't need it. So we did make a little bit this year, and what we decided to do with it, the first bit we put in, we didn't activate it, and then we realised afterwards, oh, whoops, we probably should have activated it. Oh, well, although we did pour a ton of molasses on it, so hopefully that worked. I know.
Like Wonder Twin powers activate, or what?
So and Mel, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, please. My understanding of it is to put sort of just standard, sort of your charcoal in, it's going to absorb as many nutrients as it can. So it's going to take it from wherever it can. So if you just put normal charcoal into your garden beds, it's actually for a small amount of time, it's going to rip the nutrients out of the soil to hold on to it. So it's going to make your soil worse in the short term. Whereas if you activate it, so you soak it in some kind of nutrient, then you put it in and it's already got it in there and can slowly release it.
So if you think of it almost like a sponge, like the sponge.
Basically, that's my understanding of it. So what we did with
like a sham wow.
We actually chucked it in the duck pond.
It's like a great
analogy.
So yeah, we chucked it in the duck pond and just let it soak up all the foulness from the duck pond, and then we shoveled all that out and put it into the gardens.
Okay.
Awesome. Wonderful. Okay, so we might wrap up there. I just want to read you out some stuff that people are saying in the comments. Sarah said those were beautiful words about like how to start, like how to get started. She loved how you described that. Bush says you have a great practical approach to sharing, Robyn. They are lucky to have you in Port Hedland. Honeybee said, Robyn, so well said. Enjoy the journey. I love the idea of having busy bees at different people's gardens and helping out your neighbour out and sharing seed diversity and cuttings. Which one did you just point out?
I just Sarah.
I'd said that one first. Yeah. And yeah. So yeah, people just saying, thanks for your time. Really great insights, and we really appreciate you taking the time out of your Sunday to have a chat with us. If there's nothing else you want to add, I might let you go for the afternoon. I know you're cooking a special dinner tonight.
Awesome. Yeah, look, I am, I'm available, and I'm on the page, or send me a message or whatever. I might not be able to help. I'm sort of, fairly, I know a lot about hot climate gardening, cold climate, maybe not so much. But I can certainly give it a crack if you've got any questions, because I know we didn't get to all of them today. But yeah, I'm always around. And by the page, Robyn's referencing the Australian Homesteaders group that we've got in Facebook. It was just a place where all us YouTubers could have more of a discussion instead of having all these individual discussions in our comment sections. It's just one more way for us to connect. Robyn's in there, and she's a group expert, and and she's always in there giving really great answers to people's questions. So once again, Robyn, thank you so much.
Thanks, Robyn.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
We'll wrap it up, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks. Bye.
It was so much fun. See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.